Good evening, everyone, and you're welcome to this special Fortune Tech webinar. We are excited to have here with us Oladoyin Akinsuli, a cybersecurity professional, a globally recognized one, and he's here with us to discuss his cybersecurity journey and how to start your journey, sharing skills, certifications, and career paths, whatever you need to get started, and how to scale in this dynamic field. So it is my pleasure to introduce him, and he has a whole lot of experience, with different sectors and organizations, including the ones that he has refused to tell me about. So without further ado, I'm just gonna hand over to him. Oladoyin, thank you so much for coming, and yes, you can take the stage now.
Great. Thank you very much, Abigail, for that introduction, and to our audience as well. Thank you. Looking at the topic for today, it's quite interesting. Reflecting back on how I actually started my journey on cybersecurity. Let me just go to the slide. So we're going to be talking about, starting your cybersecurity journey. We talk about, some of the skills that you probably need as part of, equipping yourself on that journey. And most importantly, we'll dive into certification, talk about some career paths, and we could probably just wrap up with, some, ideas on that. So from a presentation overview, we'll be looking at introduction to cybersecurity, like I mentioned. We talk about cybersecurity career. We'll dive into fundamental knowledge, talk about some things that we could probably, for some of the listeners that will be looking at, they want to do some self-study. We'll talk about some online learning resources, career opportunity, and, what we are actually seeing in the past couple of years now, which is the introduction of AI into cybersecurity. All right, without wasting much time, let's dive into it. So oftentimes I've actually seen people reach out to me to say, what they want to start a cybersecurity journey. And sometimes some will come and say, oh, you know what, I want to start, my information security journey. And sometimes they kind of confuse this together. So I'll probably just give you a quick introduction into what cybersecurity is all about and information security, because oftentimes people mix that together, right? So cybersecurity involves, protecting internet connected systems from various cyber threats, ensuring data integrity, right? Whereas information security is a much broader approach to to securing most of these, right? So on information security, we're looking at digital assets, we're looking at physical assets, we're looking at printed documents, we're looking at intellectual properties, we're looking at physical properties as well in terms of data centers, security to the physical buildings, and confidential business records. So it's safe to say cybersecurity, it's actually a subset of information security, because information security is much broad, like I mentioned. And when we talk about information security or even cybersecurity, depending on how you want to go, there are three major important things that we need to put into consideration. One, confidentiality. Two, integrity. And three, availability. For some of us in the cybersecurity space, we kind of refer to them as the CIA triad. And when I mean the CIA triad, is not the US CIA intelligence agency, right? It actually stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the core tenets of cybersecurity or any security, as it may be within the IT space. And in the past, couple of years, based on what I've seen on the statistics, this is actually a growing profession. We've seen growing demand from professionals because there's always need for cybersecurity. There's always need for you to protect your assets. There's always need for you to protect, some of your important either your intellectual property or your database or your application and things like that. So let's move to the next slide. So how do we start cybersecurity journey? How do we start our career? So I'm going to provide you some essential or fundamental uh, points that you need to put into consideration when you're actually starting that journey. One of them is you need to understand the foundation. And one of those foundation is one of those things I mentioned earlier in my previous slide, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You need to understand the foundation. Oftentimes, people don't understand the fundamentals and they just want to dive into cybersecurity. Some, it probably work for them, but oftentimes along the line, as they progress in their career, you'll see there's a gap because you don't really have that fundamental. So I would say when starting your journey, your cybersecurity journey, most important thing you need to put into consideration, one, understand the fundamental of that area, of that field, of that career. Two, we also need to look at career progression. And when you talk about career progression, where do I want to be in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Cybersecurity is not a profession whereby you probably just dive into it, 1, 2 years and you're out of it. Oftentimes people look at the big figures, right? Oh, they're making big figures, big salary, big package and stuff like that. Good. But you need to invest into it. There's going to be some kind of investment in terms of resources, in terms of your time, in terms of reading, networking, and things like that. And I will dive into that in some of my slides. All right, so on this slide, I talk about finding your cybersecurity specialization, which is quite very important. Now, most people, I've seen people reach out to me around, I just want to be in cybersecurity. I just want to do cybersecurity, which is good. There's nothing wrong about that. But where do you want to focus? Where do you want to focus? Do you want to be, in network security? Or do you want to be a SOC analyst? And by SOC analyst, I mean, or do you want to be, um, a pen tester? You need to define what interests you and what is going to align with that, and you understand that specialization. So on this part, I talk about, how do we, there are various career paths within cybersecurity, which I will talk about. You need to identify your area of interest, your strength, and then choose that specialization that best support or align with that. So let's talk about some of the key areas of knowledge in cybersecurity. So in total, I have four. In total, I have 14. Sorry about that. I have 14 in total. And this talk about different areas of cybersecurity that you could probably leverage on based on your strengths and your interest. Two important things, your strengths and your interest. So one of them is security risk management, and this is where we see most of those GRC, governance, risk, compliance, and I often say this is one of those areas that people can actually um, align with their other professions. So, for example, you might probably be working as an HR or a, a, a banker or someone in the financial sector, right? You've got years of experience under your belt, 10, 15 years of experience under your belt. Now, instead of you diving straight into core operations in cybersecurity, why don't you leverage on your past experience and see what you can align from the GRC side? You as an accountant or an auditor, instead of you diving straight into pen testing, there is nothing wrong in diving there, but why don't you take it one step at a time, align with that career by maybe doing maybe IT auditing, which align with your current experience or your previous experience from the financial sector, and you can now take it from there and start leveraging on other areas. You could probably be a project manager, right? You've got project PMP, management skill sets and all whatnot, right? Instead of you diving straight into networking, again, there's nothing wrong in you diving there, but why don't you take it a step and say, you know what? I want to start managing cybersecurity projects. From there, you start learning those terminologies. You start understanding how things work. You start, engaging some key stakeholders or subject matter experts within that space, and you can start building your confidence and your career on that cybersecurity journey. So we have the security risk management, which talked like I mentioned, like I said earlier, um, is around the GRC, understanding the compliance policies, frameworks, and how you can best align with that. Another area in cybersecurity, asset management, and this is where you understand some of the how to identify, group, and protect organization assets. And by assets, I mean it could be physical, it could be uh, uh, any of the intellectual property. So this is where we understand that. We talk about network security and communication. Again, of course, one of the key area, essential key area in cybersecurity is networking, and the way data move from point A to point B, from one place to the other. So how do we then secure those tunnel? How do we secure those channel? So this is where the network security communication comes in place. And this is quite an easy route for people that have got networking background under their belt. You can easily capture that. As a matter of fact, I actually started actually many years ago. I actually started from a networking background before diving into core cybersecurity, right? Another area we could probably look at is the application security, ideal for those software developers, those people that can get their hands dirty by coding. Of course, this is a very good, interesting area you could align some of your career, your knowledge in the past, and move into application security, and then take it one step at a time. One interesting one, which is quite very critical in cybersecurity, is identity and access management as well. On that, we've got IAM analysts, people that manage those areas. So these are areas you could probably explore within cybersecurity. Like I said earlier, I've got 14. Depending on how you structure them, you could probably have more than 14, but this is the way I just want to present it so that I don't confuse users there. We've got cloud security, which is quite very popular. So if you're doing most of those, Google Cloud, Azure, the AWS, you've got good knowledge around that, and you feel cybersecurity interests you, you could probably leverage on some of those experience and dive into those areas. One interesting area for me is the cybersecurity awareness and training. Actually, most organizations don't pay attention to this, and it's quite critical. And as I'm saying this because oftentimes they focus on the firewall, the technology, the firewall and all whatnot, endpoint solutions just to protect their uh, their assets, without understanding the role or the critical role that users actually play on that ecosystem. So cybersecurity awareness and training quite very important. If you want to dive into you can look into that as part of your cybersecurity career. And oftentimes it's not that technical. It's just you understanding, presenting, and managing, you know, educating users, user educations, and all of that. One area that has actually or that is actually gaining attention lately is the artificial intelligence, AI, and cybersecurity. And there's a lot of opportunity in this area, a whole lot of opportunity. It's a growing area, it's growing, so things keep changing. It's one area that I'm actually passionate about, and I've got a few research articles and publications around that. So let's talk about types of cybersecurity roles. Like I mentioned, depending on your area, based on the previous slides I presented, depending on your area, then you can now start fleshing out where you want to be, right? You can't be jack of all trade. Yes, you can know some areas, you can know some domains, but it's better you focus on one area and master that. Once you feel, oh, you know what, this area I'm good, I know everything from A to Z, which is quite impossible to do. But you can move to another area and say, you know what, I want to learn cloud security, or I want to learn network security and things like that. Then that gives you multiple domain knowledge around some of these things. So in terms of roles, we're looking at the GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, which I mentioned earlier. So what do these guys, the people in that area do? Ensure that organizations adhere to the cybersecurity regulation, policy, risk management framework. And I mentioned that in the previous slide that they look at the policies, they make sure that the organization is not going outside of those frameworks or policies so that they don't get fined or, um, around that. I mentioned identity access management specialist or analyst, depending on the way the organization want to put it out. But these are the people that just manage, your identity, the authorization, the authentication, and make sure that the right people are getting the right access, and the organization is quite secured around that. Identity and access management is quite very tricky, and it's quite very important to cybersecurity, because if you don't manage that properly and the bad actor or the threat actor get hold of your identity or access, they might be able to do some damages to your organization. So that's quite very another interesting area in cybersecurity. I'm not going to go through all, because I think I kind of mentioned some of them in the previous slide. Application security for people developing solutions, software application developers, network security, I mentioned that as well. Yeah, so let's move to the next one. All right, on this side, we're going to be looking at how do we really gain knowledge, skill sets in cybersecurity. There are many ways you can go about that, right? You can do flexible learning. You can do online courses. You can start, training yourself, learning some few things, some fundamentals on cybersecurity. I mean, we now live in a modern age where everybody have access. Not everybody, but we now live in a modern age where there is access to internet. You can spend more time online, download materials or read materials online, and make sure that you get yourself the right knowledge around that. Learning institution, you can take up maybe a short course, or a degree, or depending on what your career goal is and what your strength is around that. Uh, Courses from colleges, universities, or or other approved learning institutions. Another key area around learning is, oftentimes you find people that they're really interested in learning cybersecurity, but maybe they don't really have the time or resources. It's good you find some kind of support or mentorship program where you can key yourself into, and you find someone that can mentor you along that journey. Depending when you start gaining confidence to, start trying things on your own. Mentorship is quite very dear to me. I've got some young folks that I'm actually mentoring along that journey on cybersecurity. So if you don't really have much resources around that, you could dive into getting career support and mentorship on that. Yeah. So I mentioned something about leveraging online resources. There are so many learning platforms nowadays, LinkedIn Learning, Sarah, and every other, most of those e-learning solutions you can actually dive into and get some interactive courses on that. Articles you can read online just for you to improve your knowledge. Skills enhancement, definitely this is quite very good. If you work in an organization where, you have access to people that can show you some of the parts, or allow you to do some basic things around cybersecurity as part of your job, if your organization allow that, you could probably just start leveraging that. Most importantly, again, job market advantage, make sure that, you're looking at making research, on what the job market is saying, because that kind of dictates how the direction will most likely go, right? So that's that. Let's look at self-studying. I mentioned this self-studying earlier. So on this, you could get, materials, engage resources, community connection. If you belong to professional associations, some of them have got, communities where you can actually join as part of them, as a member, or maybe a student member, or a professional member, and you guys can start exchanging knowledge, understanding, participating in a forum or discussions, and, gradually helping you to build on connections. That is quite very important within that space. All right, so I did mention something about practical experience in cybersecurity. That's quite very important, right? Because you can't just go into that space with all your theoretical knowledge, right? Good to have those theoretical knowledge, good to have those background, but in cybersecurity, you need to get your hands dirty. And when I mean get your hands dirty is you need to be able to uh, triage, you know, any given incident or event or ticket or things like that, and be able to think about it, configure, block, or do any kind of configuration or modification at spot. So practical experience is important. If you have the opportunity to go for practical internship or co-op, please take advantage of that. I've got co-op members on my team that I manage, from some well-established institution. All they just need to do, all they just want to do is complement their theoretical knowledge which they've gained from their classroom with with the real life scenario, right? And this is where they'll be able to see, real life how we handle tickets, how we handle cybersecurity related um, incidents, and how we communicate among ourselves. So it's more like the real theater room. Getting practical experience in cybersecurity is quite valuable, and that's going to help you along the journey, as you build your skills and career. Having said that, another area that people often overlook is the soft skill side, right? Yes, cybersecurity is more of a technical space. You need to be able to uh, get yourself, understand the configuration, understand the dynamics and how things work. But again, how do you then communicate it? How do you stay composed during, incidents, especially if they are, bad incidents, right? How do you stay composed? How do you communicate with your fellow? How do you share ideas, right? And this is where the soft skills part comes in. Oftentimes, depending on and I'll share my experience here, depending on the requirement for the job, right? If I'm looking at getting maybe an entry level position that I kind of understand that um, the candidate is not bringing out much, but over time is going to learn. The key thing that I'm actually looking for is the soft skills. It's the way you communicate with me. It's the way you're thinking from a logical perspective and how you analyze things. As opposed to, of course, I don't expect you coming in as an entry level position. And even sometimes when I do interviews for, people with, years of experience, again, I'm looking at that communication. I'm looking at some of the soft skills area. So it's not an area you can, I would say, don't overlook it. please pay more attention to that. Teamwork is very important in cybersecurity. You can't just be, you can't just do everything on your own. There has to be time that you have to pass. You have to work together with a team, and uh, some other areas, right? All right. So I talked about the technical skills. Basic one, just essential one. You need to understand how to do basic troubleshooting. You know, Programming, yes, is an advantage if you can do that. Operating system, of course, if you're diving into cybersecurity, I expect you to understand the basic, operating system that we have or that would be used, right? And, networking skills, yeah, from a technical perspective, yeah, you should be able to have an idea of how, data move from point A to point B to point Z, and over time you can now start building on how do you secure those data in transit, how do you secure those data when they're at rest, and how do you secure those data, so over time you have to build on that, but understand the essential, understand the basics of this is where the data is. It needs to move from point A to point B. How does it do? So those networking basics will help you on that route. All right. So I mentioned AI technology and cybersecurity. And this is what we've been saying in the past couple of years, right? And both from the positive side and on the negative side. On the positive side, we started seeing solutions that they are more sensitive to how they can detect anomalies and how they can detect threats. So with the help of AI. On the negative side, we also started seeing how threat actors now leverage AI to be able to, compose to be able to compose, some well-crafted phishing emails, business email compromise, and also not even restricted to that, even the network as well, right? So how they can probably penetrate. And oftentimes, state-sponsored actors leverage AI. And when I mean state-sponsored actors, I'm talking about, countries that, you probably just leverage some of their skill sets just to gain maybe competitive advantage over another country. So AI has come to stay, especially in cybersecurity, is actually a game changer. Oftentimes, people overlook that, but it's actually a game changer on that. So let's move to that. So I talk about the future trends in cybersecurity. That cybersecurity threat keeps evolving. So back in the early 2000s, the way they do business email compromise, phishing, emails, it's not the way they do that now. You need to be extremely careful with the way when you receive an email, you need to go through it properly, look out for those red flags before you can detect it. So things are actually changing. The way they attack organizations now, it's quite different from how it was in the past. Now, even I mean, maybe a more recent experience that happened about 2 years ago. I share that, but I'll keep some information confidential here. Um, we've seen threat actors, you know, gaining access into a target environment. Now, instead of them launching the attack and making sure that they take over, they were there for months, they were there for years, right? They were there just observing, and unfortunately to the organization, they were unable to detect them until they launched the attack. And so things have actually changed from where people just or where threat actors just want to take instant action. Sometimes it could probably be environment for months. So that's why periodic scanning, doing real threat analysis, understanding the environment, looking at the changes in the environment is quite very important for any potential cybersecurity uh, person. So I talked about the AI machine learning integration, yeah, which is where the future is. And it's important that people start preparing themselves for the future as well. All right. As part of that career plan, don't underestimate boot camp, where get few people with like mind or join boot camps where you can actually work on some practical initiative or examples. As part of that, the most important thing from those boot camp is just those lesson learned, is things that you want to take away from that and be able to build and develop yourselves, right? And so don't underestimate the importance of boot camps. So I talked about boot camp. So on here, it's all about tip for success. So I would say, as we wrap up this, right? At the beginning, I mentioned identifying your strengths and your interests. So if you're about starting your career or your journey on cybersecurity, you need to understand those two things. What's my strength? And how do I what's my strength? And most importantly, uh, my interest as well. So again, I also mentioned the technical skills part, which I covered in the other slide. Certification, we get to it briefly. Um, uh, you know, just consistent learning in cybersecurity. You can't say um, because I had bachelor's degree or college degree in cybersecurity, and that's it. If you go that route, then I'm sure you're going to be left behind. As you can see, in cybersecurity, things are changing. In the IT world generally, not necessarily cybersecurity, things are changing almost every time. So another area I will always encourage people to look at is also networking. Building networking among peers, your place of work, and most important, in organizations or associations that you belong to. You probably just join, build those networks, because those networks are going to be important for your knowledge, for growing, and ultimately for also getting job opportunities as well. All right, so we'll talk about certification. And before I dive into this, I probably want to make a disclaimer. Oftentimes, I've seen people go take certification exams, read, pass it, and because they pass it, they feel, yes, I'm not a cybersecurity guy. That's a wrong approach. That's a wrong approach. Again, what you're going to be having is the theoretical knowledge and not the practical. In addition to that, what you're going to be having is you're going to be presenting yourself to potential recruiters as having this, because some of the certification you need years of experience or someone to validate that before you can get that, right? So you're presenting yourself to a potential recruiter that will have these years of experience, and at the end of the day, it's going to show when you start working, right? So again, I'm not saying certification is not good. I'm just saying, how do you go about it? How can you leverage it for your own career growth, right? Which I would say, work towards it, but instead of getting certification and using that as a basis of, oh, I'm not in cybersecurity, that's a wrong approach. All right, so having said that, let's talk about some entry point certification. There are so many cybersecurity certification you can take. So many, so many. Although there are some de facto standards, there are some popular ones. I think I should say that within the IT space. But depending on what your career is and what your career line, right? So from the beginner level certification, Google cybersecurity certificate, you can leverage on that. Microsoft cybersecurity analyst certification, they've got something on that. So this provides you with some entry points, um, basic knowledge on that. If you go for the Cisco certificate, that's quite very valuable. It provides you with some good knowledge of networking, and security as well. But again, it now depends on the company you want to work for. Do they use Cisco? If they don't use Cisco, then how do you then build on this career? Right. So you also need to be very careful of going for some of this industry or vendor sponsored certification. Because where you might get jobs, it might probably not be using Cisco. For example, if you do Azure and you end up working in an organization where they use AWS, you you might have some knowledge of how cloud and things work, but you might not probably align properly. So let's just be mindful of that. I talk about foundation cybersecurity certification as well. CompTIA Security Plus is one of them, and these I consider this to be a very good entry point if you want to start your journey on cybersecurity. Start from that. Start from some of these foundation or entry point certification. And by the time you present yourself to recruiter, they understand your journey and where you're coming from, and they'll see if you align with the organizational strategy and plan for the future. All right. So another one is on the certification pathway is the intermediate one. Again, Cisco certified. Be very careful with that because if you go with that route, the organization you're working for might not be using Cisco. I said that earlier. CompTIA cybersecurity analyst, a very, very good certificate. If you have that, great, but oftentimes this also requires some good knowledge of cybersecurity and IT in total. Advanced cybersecurity certification. This is where we have the heavyweight ones, these certified ethical hacker, CISSP, which is quite very popular among the cybersecurity in the cybersecurity space. These are considered, advanced cybersecurity certification that you might probably want to leverage on, and oftentimes they require years of experience and validation as well. So someone needs to endorse you, or someone needs to validate this for you to say, what, I've known ABC for X number of years, and I can validate that, has 5 years or 6 years or 10 years experience in this space. So put up. The last part on my certification pathway, I group them into 5. I call them the specialized certification. These are more optional, but they are very, very good. And how will I explain this? Great. So let me approach it this way, right? These are looking at specific areas, specific domain. If you remember in the previous slide, I talked about knowledge areas, talk about cloud, we talk about risk. So these are looking at those areas specifically, right? So if you identify that my strengths and interests is in cloud, yes, great. A very good certificate you want to go for is a certified cloud security professional, because this validate that you're actually a subject matter expert, so to speak, in that cloud space. Another one is the CISM, Certified Information Security Manager. Again, most of the certificate requires on this specialized require years of experience. So if you want to be a CISM, then there is that expectation that you're going to be managing team, and there's also that expectation that you have gone through some areas and you've proven yourself in some of those domain areas, right? CISA is one of them. Ideally, that's good. That's a very good route for people in the financial space that want to get into cybersecurity. You could probably leverage on that and get CISA, then understand how system information works, auditing, and some and how to put some controls in place so that you can better safeguard the organization. So CISA is another very good one. C-risk, ideally for risk management, great certification as well. So number 5, specialized certification is just talking about specific domain areas within cybersecurity that you want to focus on. All right. So again, I did mention that certification demonstrates knowledge and skills to employers, right? But oftentimes you've seen that people just acquire certification without, practically using them, right? And it depends on what you do. It depends on how you grow within that space. You know, nowadays certification don't necessarily demonstrate your skills, right? It might help you to navigate the recruitment process, like you getting spotlighted during HR recruitment process. Like, oh, let's get this. It can push your CV forward, right? But most importantly, it doesn't demonstrate those technical skill sets that some recruiters are looking for. Managing certification sometimes is expensive, especially if you have multiple certification. You keep getting, you keep getting renewal, notice membership is about to expire. You need to pay, and I belong to those category as well. And sometimes it's like maybe I should just let some of this certificate retire. I don't nothing to prove anymore, right? But but managing them on an annual basis and meeting their criteria sometimes can be quite very challenging. Okay. A strategic step for career growth, talk about networking, talk about skills, which is quite very important. Stay familiar with, latest cybersecurity trend and technologies. AI is actually shaping so many things. You can see there's a lot of investment in AI, even from the US government and even China. So there's a lot of investment in that direction, right? So you need to stay focused and stay with some of the latest cybersecurity trends, right? Definitely pursue certification is good. It's gonna um, help your resume, to get notice and stuff. But depends on what your strategy is. And most importantly, I talk about the practical gain hands-on experience that you just you can't do without that. It's not like some other areas or some other fields that are more theoretical. This you need to get your hand, a bit staying playing with computers, right? All right. So I talked briefly about personalizing your resume. Research the organization and the job description thoroughly before you apply. Don't just apply for any job, right? Look at the job description. Is this job talking about cloud? Is it talking about network? Is it a SOC analyst job? Is it a GRC job? So don't use a GRC, a GRC knowledge and bullet point to apply for a cloud related stuff. Again, I'm not saying some of those skills are not transferable. They are, but tailor your resume properly and personalize it to the job. Uh, if you are starting your career, uh, if you are if you're starting a career, go for those entry positions, right? There's no point you going for a job where they require 15 years experience or 20 years experience. They might probably not even look at your resume, right? But oftentimes, it probably just save you those time, look for those entry, gain those knowledge, then grow. Gain those knowledge, then grow. You can even grow within your organization or within your team. There might be space or, vacancies there. Step into that, then keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. Another good way to do it, if you are a student fresh out of school or you're a student, you do your co-op or internship, make sure you get into any organization. Then from there, walk through all those your co-op years, and once you're done with those co-op, they might want to retain you. I'm doing something similar with my with some of my co-op students as well, right? So take advantage of that. That helps you from not jumping into the job market once you're done with school. Yeah, so I talk about the entry level position opportunities as well. Another important thing is the mentorship program. Find, belong, join any mentorship program that align with what you want to achieve. That's very important to do. Right? People reach out to me and say, well, can you just mentor me for X number of years? Depending on my availability, and I say, okay, yeah, great, I'll do that. Or oftentimes people just, subscribe to some mentorship platform, and they get assigned to mentors, and they can guide, and which can guide them accordingly on that part. All right. So in conclusion, I'll talk about some of the core concepts, getting the right foundation, principles for cybersecurity. Um, I talked about the career path, the kind of jobs based on your area of interest and the kind of job that kind of align with that. And wrapping that up, I talk about where the future of cybersecurity is going, which is more of we've started seeing so many interesting things, zero trust, the AI, the quantum, and things like that. So that's helping to shape the direction of cybersecurity. And things have been getting done quicker, faster. Threat actor are getting smarter. So it's not a battle of machines, so to speak, right? So we've got the threat actor preparing, equipping their machines to attack, and you on the other side managing those devices or application for organization also have to equip in order for you to defend any possible attack coming from that. All right, so great. We made it to the last to the last slide, questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Oladoyin. I mean, you've answered lots of questions that I have here already. Got a line up, and as I was just looking at them, it seems you're just answering. You're just answering. But I'm still gonna mention, maybe ask a few just from here. I'll select a few, and if anyone else has a question, they can as well post it in the chat box. So, talking about soft skills, I know you've mentioned it, but I'm still going to ask this question. What role do soft skills play in cybersecurity, and which ones are most valuable?
Two major, depending on how you look at it. But I would say one, communication. It's quite very important. Communication. And those communication comes very handy when you have a cyber attack. How do you communicate with your peers? How do you convey your message? How do you tell them what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Some of these attack comes depending on them. Some are probably come up in the middle of the night, right? So how does your SOC team says it, interpret it, communicate to your manager to say we're under attack? So communication is skills. How do you convey your ideas, among your peers to say, what? Yes, I like your idea, but let's look at it from this angle. So communication is there. Another part is teamwork. Understand that you can do everything all by yourself, depending on the kind of organization you work in. I've seen a one-man team of cybersecurity. It does everything. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking at a bigger picture, you want to work with some of the big companies or big organizations, you're probably going to be working with a lot of people. So teamwork is very important. Understanding those handshake in terms of what you do and how you then transfer it to your co-member or your team member or other members outside your immediate team within the organization. So those two soft skills, I would say, will go a long way. We can add some, patience as well. Is there because oftentimes people want to be reactive in the way they do things. Nothing wrong in that, but sometimes taking a step back, patient, look at things, analyze it thoroughly, understand the root cause, then propose some of those solutions to best address it. Will most help achieve what they want to achieve. But so for me, I would say to communication and teamwork.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask one question that I also feel it's going to be useful to anyone that is listening right now and obviously later on. So, what are some of the most effective ways, that you can stay updated on latest cybersecurity, threats and technologies and stuff like that?
Good question. You can stay up to date with in so many ways, right? One, you can join an association if
Mhm.
your career align with that. Uh, I'm, I belong to so many professional associations, ISACA and the rest, and they send me, emails, journals, and every other thing, even though sometimes I don't read them, I must admit. But
We've
uh,
caught you.
just yeah, but that's one. Internet is a good source. You can type in something on the internet or subscribe to any of these IT podcasts or cybersecurity podcasts. Sometimes I listen to them while driving or doing school runs. I probably just listen to them, even
Mhm.
though my kids don't like it. They feel they don't understand what they're saying. Can you change it to music? But sometimes you just wanna listen to that. That's another good way. Listening to news like recently, the U.S. government announced something big on AI, and a couple of days later, China also announced something around AI, right? So that keeps you updated on what's going on. What else? Membership is another good source, like we mentioned. News, blogs, forums, things like this that we're currently doing this kind of webinar. Subscribing to webinar, free webinar, listen to them,
Mhm.
take some few notes from there, add it to your knowledge, and you can grow from that.
Okay. So lastly, before you run, another question just popped up and I really like this one. So how
Okay,
important is networking in cybersecurity and what are the best ways to connect with industry professionals?
good. I think without even looking at it from cybersecurity, let's look at it generally. Networking is important. You need to network,
Mhm.
right? Now, when it comes to cybersecurity, there are subject matter experts that you need to meet, or you probably want to associate or learn some few things from. So that's a very good point, right? So networking is quite very valuable. It's actually important in cybersecurity, and these
Mhm.
are comes from maybe people you're meeting for the first time or people you've worked with in the past, and you guys were able to develop and build those professional relationship over time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, where do you meet them? Some of them are through professional membership, associations. Some of them are conferences, right? So you join or you subscribe or attend, some cybersecurity related conferences, and you meet people sitting next to you, or maybe um, or you know, fairs and things like that. You meet them, you ask questions, and from there you guys exchange. Um, you guys can exchange contact, and from there you build up on that. LinkedIn is another professional way you can actually network with people. If you find somebody on your career path and you want to align, you could probably reach out to them and see how that works with them.
Awesome. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. A huge thank you to our incredible speaker, Oladoyin Akinsuli, for sharing such valuable insights with us today. We also appreciate all of you that has joined us today and those that will be watching later. Before you go, don't forget to follow us on social media and keep an eye out on upcoming events. Once again, thank you so much, Oladoyin, and have a great evening.
My pleasure. You too. Bye for now.
Bye.